Welcome back to Legacy Matrix, stories of the strange and mysterious. This is the story of an outlaw pilot, Colton Harris Moore. 67 felonies, 6 stolen airplanes, and on the run for 3 years, all before his 20th birthday. Let's get into it. Now, Colton Harris Moore was never the cool kid in school. The bullies picked on him, nobody talked to him, and all he wanted was what the other kids had. A clean pair of shoes, a simple haircut, parents who gave a shit. But his mom was an alcoholic. His dad never paid child support, and he lived in a trailer park, and he was forced to scrounge for food. But one day, as the bullies were picking a fight with Colton, the new kid in class stands up to all of them. A kid that had just got out of a 2-year sentence from juvenile hall. Harley Iron Wing Davidson. Now, just like Colt, Harley's dad was out of the picture. His mom was a junkie, but Harley had some cool stuff and generally gave off a note of confidence. He had a new pair of shoes, a laptop, and hell, even an iPod. You see, Harley at the age of 16 had served 2 years for residential burglary, and they were all stolen. Now, Colton had stolen food from the neighbors, but to have everything a kid in the early 2000s would want for free, it was enticing. And Harley was going to teach him. Meeting at the cul-de-sac at midnight, Harley shows him how to pick locks, find the hidden spare keys, and lays down some basic rules. Don't rob somebody's house if you know who lives there. Don't turn on the lights. If you ever get caught or spotted, just run and never feel guilty. As per Harley's own words, remember, this ain't hurt nobody. Everything is stolen is insured. They'll just reimburse it through their insurance and get something even better. Wise words from someone who's clearly dealt with an insurance company a time or two. Breaking into dozens of homes over the course of weeks, Colton's thrill was being able to just eat a good meal, play some video games, and take the spare change he found his lunch money. Now, Colton knew this was bad, but then again, he wasn't hungry anymore, and life was good. But you gotta ask, where are the police in all this, with kids robbing dozens of homes? Well, the San Juan Islands, where they're from, has an extreme wealth division. 1 in 3 homes in the area are vacation homes, meaning there's a lot of empty homes all year round. The perfect place for residential burglary. But for Colton, back at home, life was actually getting worse. His mom is now physically addicted to alcohol. He had tried to check her into rehab, but she said no. He had bought a AA handbook for her. She burnt it in front of his face. And Child Protective Services were called dozens of times after physical fights broke out between the two. All Colton wanted was his mom to get her act together so he could be a normal kid and not forced to scrounge for food. But nope, she would throw him out in the streets to survive on his own. He would set up a tent in the middle of the forest, and there you go. At the age of 15 now, as the neighbors noticed, their fridges are being raided for frozen pizza and any food he could find. And slowly but surely, the murmurs of a mysterious boy who only broke in just to eat spread across the island pretty fast. But the neighbors noticed a lot more than just frozen pizza and food gone missing. At the crack of dawn, the FBI bust down the door to his mom's house. They had a warrant in hand for Colton Harris Moore. And it wasn't for stealing food, but for committing identity theft. His mom was shocked. No way. It couldn't have been sweet little Colt. He didn't even live at the house anymore. The FBI called BS on that search and searched the entire home altogether regardless. And yeah, Colt really didn't live there. Now, tracking a scent with bloodhounds, they go deep into the woods and came across a tent stuffed to the brim. As they unzip the door with their pistols drawn, piles of stuff fall out. We're talking laptops, jewelry, telescopes, credit cards, driver's licenses, even checkbooks. And it all linked back to Colt. But Colt himself was nowhere to be found. Once the trail had gone cold, the feds wrapped it up and called it a day. He was still hiding in the forest, though. Now, the next morning, a handwritten note shows up on his mom's doorstep. Cops raided me, everything's on lockdown, I'm leaving for Wenatchee. Won't be back. Cops want to play, huh? Well, it's no little game. This is war, Colt thought. Colt had watched the whole thing go down from far away. Now, although the sheriffs there, locally, had no resources to actually catch him, the FBI would bring in professional manhunters, made multiple warrants for his arrest, and placed wanted posters all over town. Colton knew he couldn't go back home. He was truly on his own. And for a town that didn't have a lot going on, everyone was focused on trying to catch him. Now, he started stealing cars and boats and purchased lockpicking kits and night vision goggles with stolen credit cards. He would hide out in the empty homes when the FBI helicopters were overhead. The police had pulled up to several homes he was in the middle of breaking into and managed to escape. Every time homeowners came back to see Colt just chilling on their couch, only to vanish out the door to the next without a trace. And the local newspaper, who was listing burglaries by the day for months. So to outrun the FBI with professional manhunters for months at age of 15, I mean, I'm not going to condone it, but that's impressive. Colt was pretty smart, but he had one nasty habit, leaving the lights on. When residents noticed the lights on in one of the neighbors' houses that were gone on vacation, they called the cops. Now, dozens of officers surrounded the home without the sirens and the lights on. He couldn't run this time. He had been caught red-handed. Now, at the age of 16, any charges Colton would face would not show up on his record as an adult. Theoretically, he could still turn his life around. And while his mom often made excuses for his criminal behavior, this time, the kid was going to have to face the music. So Colt pleaded guilty to 3 counts of residential burglary, and with his history of evading the FBI for months at a time, sentenced to 3 years at a maximum security juvenile jail, and the entire town could sleep at night once again. While in juvenile jail, Colton once again was the weird kid. Kids pushed him around, stole his commissary money, and treated him pretty badly. But these weren't just kids this time. They were full-on gang members. So he did what he did. He isolated himself and filled his days reading about flying airplanes and focused on a school where his grades got better. He did as he was told, and he planned to get a college degree once he got out. And it seemed that with some structure, he was actually going to change for the better. So in 10 months of this good behavior, he was transferred into a fenceless group home. The kid that had outrun the FBI now had the freedom to wear the clothes he wanted and be around kids who weren't there for violent assault charges. Colt was flourishing, and although he had 2 years left in his sentence, it felt like he was given another chance at life. As the guards did their midnight body count, they noticed the window unlocked. The bed was empty. Colton was missing. He had escaped with an hour head start. Now, front pages news striking fear into all the locals. Residents were furious. The kid they'd spent all this time trying to catch was now in the wind. His mom went to the press and pleaded for him to turn himself in. Now, escaping from juvenile jail could add up to about 4 years to the sentence. But the police were so desperate to catch him because of the whole goose chase thing, they publicly said they would give him an additional 28 days if he turned himself in. So we get out of 19. Starts his life with nothing on his record, or hide his identity with the warrant out for his arrest for the rest of his life. And as a 17-year-old kid, now with his brain not fully developed, Colt kept running. So with the heat on his mom's house, Colt thought maybe his old friend Harley Iron Wing Davidson could give him a place to hide out, maybe even some help. But soon, he found out that Harley was now in prison. He had tried to steal a 1,000-pound safe from his mom's church. So with nowhere to go, Colt began breaking into homes, purchasing the lockpicks again and the night vision and the stolen credit cards, all to make his burglaries even easier. And for 3 months, Colt is breaking into dozens of homes, and the police have no idea where he's at. Until the police were in pursuit of a Mercedes-Benz driving 100 miles an hour down the road. Now, the car veered off into the parking lot, crashed into a tree, and when the police pulled up, it looked as if the driver had jumped out of the car while it was moving and ran off into the forest. Now, inside the car, they found a backpack that was filled with stolen credit cards, driver's licenses, night vision goggles, and a digital camera that had photos on it. Yep, it was Colton Harris Moore. Soon the image was on the wanted posters all over the county. Throughout that summer, hundreds of residents called 911 with the encounters and sightings of Colt, but every time he kept getting away. But how is this possible, you might ask? It's estimated that 80% of all burglaries are committed by people on drugs, but Colt, he was sober. Every house he broke into always had the alcohol untouched. He didn't have a car. They couldn't pull him over. He lived off the grid, and most importantly, the kid was young and healthy. But as the legend of Colton Harris Moore grew, with his Facebook fan page at 15,000 members, the town was on edge, and the gun shop sold out of ammo and shotguns. And security cameras were placed everywhere, and residents assumed every crime in the town was Colt's fault. I mean, a 17-year-old burglar with nothing left to lose? Yeah, that's gonna keep you up at night. Stalking the local airport on the Orca Islands for days, Colt was hiding out in the forest watching the takeoffs and landings. He knew when the staff worked, where they would be at, and took action. Before sunrise, he walked up to a brand new Cessna 182 Skyline. He had flown this plane in video games, hundreds of times. He had known roughly how to fly it, maybe even how to start it. So he found the keys on the seat, read the owner's manual, rode the plane out to the runway, and without much thought, started the engine and took off, now flying into the mountains. Now, you may wonder, how is this possible? Wouldn't air traffic control see a random plane that never reported itself and maybe think it's a little suspicious? Well, you see, in America, if you don't cross any restricted flying areas and stay under 18,000 feet, you're pretty free to fly wherever you want. But you see, flying a plane is easy. Landing an airplane is a different story. Colton looked at the gas gauge and realized he was almost out of gas because he never checked it before he left. He needed to land now. So he finds a flat patch within the mountains, lines up the plane, prays to God, and goes in. The landing gear was destroyed. The propeller was twisted up, and once Colt woke up from being knocked out, he threw up all over the plane. After 6 months of no reported break-ins or burglaries within the area, locals thought Colt maybe was done, maybe even dead. But his war against the police was still very much on. So arriving in the town 6 months later, he gets into a police car. He steals the officer's cell phone, ticket book, breathalyzer, laptop, and an MP-15 assault rifle with a box of rounds. So far, he hadn't harmed anyone physically, but now he was armed. Who knew what he was capable of if he gets backed into a corner because of everything that he's done? You know, if he has a weapon, I wouldn't put it past him to use it. Now, while some saw the act as daring, others loved that kid that was sticking it to the cops, living life on his own terms, a Robin Hood that didn't give back to the poor. But instead, he had a fan club selling merch with his face on it. Colt made sure to give his fans a great show. So on September 8th, he steals $250,000 boat and heads towards the Friday Harbor. There, he stalks the local airport and steals $1 million airplane. This time, he made sure it was filled with gas and crash-landed all the way back on the Orca Islands. Now, the police knew he was there on the Orca Islands, maybe at the airport or on the dock. Somehow, he gets through the police barricades, steals a twin-engine boat, goes full speed all the way up towards Canada, and illegally crosses the border. So over the course of a week, he commits some more burglaries, steals a bit more, a couple more cars go missing, and he road trips all the way across to Canada, literally the middle of the North America. There he steals an Escalade and heads down to Bonner's Ferry in Idaho. Mind you, this is a kid doing all this. The one not so smart thing Colton did was fill his car up with gas at a gas station. They have security cameras. They track the cars easily. The police could see where he was going, so if a car ran out of gas, he would just leave it there, break into another one until he got to his next spot. Pretty smart kid, honestly, living that GTA lifestyle. A day later, he steals another airplane and flies all the way from Idaho back to Granite Falls, Washington, where he actually lands the plane safely in the middle of the mountains. Now, pretty soon, the local hometown once again had a huge burst in burglaries. He's doing the usual, living in the empty vacation homes, eating frozen pizzas, and also bringing a ton of heat. You see, aircraft theft is one of the rarest forms of theft in the world. Rumors at the time are that it was some rogue pilot who had stolen the plane to go on a quick trip to impress some girl. But they couldn't be any more wrong. It was a kid. Even with the police swarming his hometown, Colt starts breaking into grocery stores, stealing thousands of dollars in cash, and leaving footprints with the tagging CIA. Now, he's doing all this barefoot. The media christened him with the name the Barefoot Bandit. A stolen airplane and grocery store burglary, complete with the telltale chalk outlines of bare feet, as folks on Washington State San Juan Islands worried. The burglar, known as the Barefoot Bandit, has returned. Police start to think the burglary is the handiwork of Colton Harris Moore. Colt was stealing airplanes, boats, and luxury cars and breaking into dozens of homes and businesses in the area, only to disappear in the woods without a trace. Now, people fell in love with Colt. He had a huge fan base. Mind you, it's about 2010 now. The recession's still on. Bankers got bailed out. Corporations got billions. The common man was kind of screwed out of all of it. So in rejection of all of that, Colt took life into his own hands and was living life on his own terms, outsmarting not only the police, but the DHS and the FBI, and the government itself. Though by now, city officials on the island informed all of the residents that there were now dozens of armed bounty hunters stalking the forests, looking for Colt, creeping in their backyards, and searching in empty homes. See, but Colt was already long gone. On the morning of May 30th, 2010, a letter shows up on the front doorstep of an Oregon animal hospital. Drove by, had some extra cash. Please use this money for the care of the animals. Colton Harris Moore, aka the Barefoot Bandit. For his legion of Facebook fans, I gotta say, this is a smooth move. I mean, who could hate a kid that came from a rough home, but just loves animals? But what does it really imply? You can't catch me because Colt had stolen a full-on racing boat and drove all the way towards Oregon, where he had talked over the phone with some attorneys about selling the rights to his life story for a potential movie. But people knew the story just wouldn't end well. We're talking stolen planes, stolen guns, stolen boats. So another attorney's office comes forward and makes a deal with Colt. Now, you see, an anonymous donor said that if Colt turns himself in, Colt would get $50,000 and the attorney's office would represent him at court all for free. But that deal was to expire within 5 days. We're talking about a fugitive collecting his own bounty. Unheard of. But 5 days later, not a word from Colt or the anonymous donor, who is still to this day unknown. The FBI was showing up to his mom's house every day, searching the home, warning her that harboring a fugitive is a felony, but all she wanted to know was her son even alive? She would just fall deeper into the pit of alcoholism as the days went on. Now, over the course of a week, he started stealing several more cars and started road tripping all the way to Yankton, South Dakota. Arriving at midnight, he needed a place to kind of hang out, so he cased out several homes in the area until he found one with no cars. He thought if they weren't home by midnight, they were probably gone on vacation. Hungry and filthy, Colt puts his clothes in the washer at the house. He heats up the oven and throws in a frozen pizza for himself. He goes upstairs, gives himself a haircut with a trimmer he found, and then he finally hopped in the shower to relax after a long week of road tripping. At 3 a.m., the Clark family had come back from a long vacation with their kids, half asleep. They headed inside the house with their bags ready to just pass out. But something was off. The TV was still on, Jell-O containers were stacked on the floor, frozen pizzas were heated up. And now, as the dad walks into all the rooms, he notices at the end of the hallway, the bathroom door is slightly open. And as he reaches out to open the door, it slams shut. The dad, a 340-pound dude, muscles open the door until a naked man covered in lotion sprints towards the basement. Now the dad chases him and yells, "Get out of the house! Get out of the house!" And by the time he got to the basement, with his adrenaline pumping, a red laser pops up on his chest. Colt let it be known that he was armed. Now the dad locks the basement door, runs to the car with his family, breaking the garage door as he backed out, and heads over to his neighbor's house to call 911. Now, Colt's freaking out. He doesn't know what to do. His clothes are still in the washer. I mean, he's literally trapped in the basement. Minutes later, the officers swarm the house on the lookout for a naked man covered in lotion with a gun. Colt was going to get out of this one. But once the SWAT team bashed in the door and the canines were let loose, and after an hour of searching every nook and cranny of that house, no one was inside. Searching the forest close by, bloodhounds and helicopters with thermal cameras all searching over the area, but Colt had escaped. And this time it was close, real close. Only now, you see, Colt had smashed the washer to grab open his clothes, spilling gallons of water into the basement, grabbed his bag, and because he was so skinny, he slipped out of the basement window, broke into the neighbor's house, and stole their car keys. And he did this all real fast. And after the Clark family was shown a mugshot of Colton, they confirmed that the naked man with the gun covered in lotion was Colton Harris. Now, while the FBI didn't know exactly where he was headed or where he was at, they had a rough idea. Colt loved to steal near small airports. Now, within the week, Homeland Security held meetings with every private plane owner in all of the surrounding states, warning them of the Barefoot Bandit. They told the pilots to lock their planes, making sure they were safe. Don't leave the keys on the seat, they said. Colt actually knew about these meetings because he had saw Homeland Security going around for about a week. Colton was waiting out in the forest near the Monroe County Airport, reading the magazines and watching closely to everything. He was waiting to find the perfect plane to escape the country. Colt knew his limits. He would only steal a plane that he had flown in video games, which is kind of insane to think about, and on the 4th of July, that moment happened during the sunrise. Colt snuck into the hangar, walked up to a brand new Cessna 400, about a $700,000 plane, with the keys on the seat. He made sure to fill it up with gas, went through the pilot's checklist, started the engine, and took off in the plane and headed down south. Happy 4th of July. Now, doing the math, the Cessna 400 should be able to go all the way to Cuba on one tank of gas, if there's no crazy winds. I mean, Cuba's got its benefits. There's no extradition treaty, and even though Colt didn't speak English, he'd figure it out. But instead of Cuba, he had actually flown towards the Bermuda Triangle, and of course started to run out of gas and needed to land ASAP. Flying over water is really dangerous. There is no emergency landing, but luckily it was near some islands. So in between the sand and the palm trees, he finds a patch of land, lines up the plane, puts down the flaps, prays to God, and he lands as the wheels touch the ground. They got stuck in the west sand, absolutely destroying the aircraft, and it would set off emergency locator transmitters in the airplane. He managed to keep it level somehow. The airplane's nose is in the grass. He's pretty much doing an endo at this point. He got out of the plane, reportedly uninjured, and headed into the islands, because within seconds it had sent an SOS signal to the U.S. Coast Guard via GPS. Colt knew he needed to get the hell out of there. When the U.S. Coast Guard received the signal, they contacted the owner of the Cessna 400, Mr. Miller, to see if they actually needed the help in the Bahamas. Was it real or was it a false alarm? Standard protocol. Now, imagine yourself owning a $700,000 plane in Indiana, but today it's the 4th of July. You're relaxing, got your feet up, when you get a call from the U.S. Coast Guard about your plane crashing in the Bahamas. You'd be pretty freaked out. This came as a shock because remember when Homeland Security held those meetings with all the private plane owners, warning them of this kid thief? Well, the owner of that plane, Mr. Miller, wasn't there. And after the staff at the hangar confirmed the Cessna 400 wasn't there anymore, the U.S. Coast Guard and Bahamian Defense Force were told the craft was stolen, and most likely it was Colton Harris Moore, being that it was the 5th plane he had stolen. Within minutes of crash landing, Colt walked barefoot into the jungle and towards the first site of civilization. He had actually picked a really good time to come to the Bahamas, because it was the 4th of July weekend. Tourists are everywhere, so a random white kid in the city, it makes sense. So Colt broke into some cars and some homes. He had survived squatting in an empty vacation home. They were plastered all across the island. But as the week went on, the military locked down all the airports, police were brought in from other islands. Wanted posters were placed everywhere to alert people. Bahamas police have been searching for the fugitive for days, since the stolen plane was found ditched offshore, but he'd been staying a step ahead of the manhunt. Colby Curry, one of the locals, said Harris Moore had been in his bar Tuesday night, and just looked like the average guy that just came in to get a drink. He looked like no one scared of being caught, the man said. Still, the FBI warning posters warns Harris Moore could be dangerous. Bahamas police have promised to intensify their hunt for him. The island was small, but where else could he go? An island hop away, there was a party on the bluff. Music blasting, tiki torches, liquor, tourists partying all over the harbor. So, from the ocean, a boat glides in towards the dock, and a white boy yells, "Did you hear about the plane I crashed?" The music cuts and the local replies, "Who are you?" "Colton Harris," he says. Holy hell, this was the kid from the wanted posters. Armed and dangerous, stolen planes all over the world apparently. But the local just played it cool. He asked why he was so far from home. "Too many cops," Colt replied. "Where are the cops now?" the local asked. "Well, we don't really have that many cops around here." Colt said, "Well, call them. I'm bored. I want to get chased." The man thought it was a joke, sort of laughing. "Call the cops." "No, seriously, call the cops. I want to get chased. For real. Call them." And as the local pulled out his phone, Colt started up the engine and screamed, "I'm gone. Read about me on the internet," and took off towards the bay as all the locals could think was, what the hell was that? Colt was flying across the bay towards the light over at the harbor island, filled with the hotels and docks. It was the perfect place to go, to hide out from the cops and also maybe find a better boat. Colt grabbed his pistol, a bag, and sprinted towards the hotel, but then a security guard starts chasing after him. But once after the guard saw that pistol, he backed off, realizing he didn't get paid enough to get killed. The guard would call the cops and he went back to Colt's boat to take the keys so Colt couldn't get away. So that call went out to everyone on the island. The police, security guards, armed citizens were searching. Even the military was looking for Colt now. So with weapons drawn, search teams are combing the island for the next few hours. Police are patrolling all of the harbors. There was no way Colt was going to get out. At 3:30 a.m., one of the officers walked off the dock to go to the bathroom. As he's doing his business, the kid runs out, jumps on the boat, and takes off. God damn it, it was Colt hiding in the bushes, waiting for that perfect moment the entire time. Officers with machine guns and police boats started chasing him out of the bay, but there was no way to actually catch him because the boat that Colt had stolen was fully capable of outrunning the cops, and even better, had a full tank of gas. See, while the ocean was quiet, the roar of the engines could be heard all across the island. And as Colt looked back, watching the police lights fade into the horizon, he couldn't help but smile. But just then, the boat starts losing speed. He realized he had just hit a sandbar and he had beached the boat. He gives it more gas, but it only dug him in even deeper. You see, when Colt was looking at the cops, he had missed the boat's GPS warning of the upcoming sandbar, and now he was stuck. His 2-year-long run come down to this, and honestly, he froze and held his gun to his head. Now, 4 minutes with the officers surrounding him, he refused to put his hands up until Colt fired one shot at the officers and gassed up the boat, hoping to make one last escape. But the police would pepper the side of his boat with 20 rounds, all throughout the boat hull. As the smoke cleared, Colt threw his hands up and he was placed in handcuffs. He was done. What's insane is that the Bahamian police actually captured Colt without anyone getting killed. That wouldn't happen in the US, let's be honest. Colt was wanted by the FBI, the US Marshals, dozens of police departments, Homeland Security, Canadian Mounties, and the Bahamian government, and they all wanted him to pay for his crimes. But the Bahamian government had their first pick, and man were they proud of it. Parading Colt around in that walk of shame with 5 burglaries, 3 boat thefts, possession of a loaded firearms, firing at an officer, etc., etc. He would get 10 years at least for this at the infamous Bahamian Fox Hill prison, considered one of the worst prisons in the world. But they had only one charge for Colt, and that was not presenting his passport when he entered the country. Colton Harris Moore was captured Sunday in the Bahamas after a high-speed boat chase with authorities. He was fined $300, which the U.S. Embassy paid and sent back to the U.S. Police officials there all smiling and chuckling. You know, he got a slap on the wrist, basically, so I don't think he's too worried about it. I think he's got some more problems waiting for him in the States, though. American prosecutors had to wrangle 67 felonies in 3 different countries and wrap it all up into one court case, and honestly, he was looking at about 20 to 30 years in prison. Colton had hired one of the most infamous attorneys in the game, the guy that you call when the evidence is stacked against you, John Henry Brown. Never heard of him? He was Ted Bundy's attorney. They had calculated the restitution for the planes, the cars, the homes, and the search operations at a staggering $1.4 million that Colt was going to have to pay. Now, remember that whole movie deal he was trying to set up selling his life story? Well, the courts mandated that to pay all the victims back, he was going to sell the rights to his life story for a potential movie to Fox Entertainment for $1 million. And then let's say the victims are paid back for about 1 day. He could still never make enough money for anything about his life story. Even if, we're talking books, t-shirts, video games, anything. And while this may seem harsh, the courts wanted it to be known that crime doesn't pay. Now, Attorney Brown's specialty isn't defending the crimes, but rather why they happened. They showed that Colt's home life was really bad. His mom never fed him, his dad never paid child support, his mom drank during a pregnancy and diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome when he was a kid. Colt said he was going to go to college after this and he was going to get his life together. And the court felt sympathy, including the judge stating, "I think this case is a tragedy, but also a triumph of human spirit. I sympathize with the defendant for his terrible upbringing. It was a tragedy he had to steal food to survive and alcoholism of an abusive mother. But nevertheless, the sentence Colt got was 6 years, and I wish him well." Now, a decade later and out of prison, we don't know much about Colt or what he's up to today. But from the few interviews that he has given, he spoke about hating the moniker of the Barefoot Bandit, and he wishes to move on from that. Friends say that he changed his number and he went off the grid and no one really knows where he's at. Maybe he's living on a warm island somewhere. Thanks for listening.